Hello, everyone, and welcome to Book Break. Today, my special guest is Molly, who is an avid reader, and she also does our Monday night book chats on Facebook. And today, Molly and I are going to talk about books that we feel would be really good or well-suited for book discussion groups. I lead As the Page Turns Club here at the library. And I just looked it up today. We've been going strong since February of 2016.
Oh,
Wow.
So, woohoo!
Almost 10 years.
Yeah. So, a lot of benefits of book discussion groups. You know, social connections. A lot of my people say they would have never have chosen to read a book, on their own, but realized when they read it in book discussion that they either liked it or...
Yeah, kind of expands people's genres. You have a lot more experience with book discussions than I do. I was a children's librarian, so my book discussions involved trying to eke out a few sentences from third graders, things like, I liked the pig, and Charlotte's Web.
Right.
And then we'd make a craft.
Yeah.
So I've never had to lead a book discussion for adults. And believe it or not, I've only been part of one book group in my whole life.
Oh, wow.
I
That
called
kind
it
of surprises me.
Yeah, I call it it was the mommy book group.
Okay.
Kind of when my kids were little, we'd meet at a Panera and maybe say a paragraph about the book, and then it would move on to, what terrible things our children were doing, or depending on the person, what fantastic things their children were up to.
Right.
So, yeah, I have in my head when I retire, I'm going to attend a lot of book groups. But up
Okay.
until now, I just read a lot on my own.
All right. Well, what are some of the factors that you think would make a book good for a book discussion?
One of the things you already mentioned, just getting yourself reading something that you normally wouldn't pick up. I always found those were the best ones that we read, something I never in a million years would have thought I liked, but, I'm going to meet with the moms at Panera. I better read this book, and I'm the librarian, so they expect me to say something about it.
Mm-hmm.
So just picking up different things that you normally wouldn't. Also, if everybody loves the book, I mean, that's nice, but it doesn't always lead to a good discussion.
Right, really dull discussion. I always look for ones that have maybe, if not a controversial topic, something in there.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be either a family drama, something that is like a prominent thing like climate change or something that's happening today, maybe an ambiguous ending.
Yeah,
a
or
lot
like
of
the way
thoughts
the
there.
author writes, what decisions they made.
Right.
And you just described most of the books I'm going to talk about today.
All right.
Family dramas, climate change.
I've got some of that myself, so we will dive right in.
Okay.
All right, my first one, and I think you just read this as well, so
Yes.
please feel free to chime in at the end. It's Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McGonaghy. And I've read everything by her now. The first one was Migrations,
Yeah,
and
I
then
read that one too. I liked it.
Something About Wolves was the second one.
I didn't read that one. I
Yeah.
don't remember.
But hers always have an element of either climate change or a little bit futuristic in there. And this one is no exception. We are on a remote island off the coast of Antarctica. Dominic Salt and his 3 children are caretakers of Shearwater. So this is a tiny island, but it is home to the world's largest seed bank. It was once full of researchers, but with sea levels rising, the Salts are now the final inhabitants, and their job is packing up the seeds before they are transported to safer and higher ground. So, despite the wild beauty of life here, isolation has taken its toll on the Salt family. So, the son is 18, and he is suffering his first heartbreak, finds relief at his punching bag. His sister Fen, who was 17, has started spending her nights on the beach amongst the seals.
Yeah, with the seals. Sleeping with the seals.
Right, feeling much more at home with seals and wild creatures than she does with people. And then we have 9-year-old Orly, the youngest child. He is obsessed with botany. He was really entranced with the idea of the seed bank And he is extremely fearful of the loss of the natural world. And Dominic, who has lost his wife, finds himself turning towards the past and having conversations with his dead wife on a frequent basis. So one night during a horrible storm, the worst the island has ever seen, a woman washes up on the shore, almost dead, and the salts begin to nurse her back to life. Rowan is her name. And at first they're suspicious. Then they grow to be very affectionate. She starts becoming a member of kind of like their little family. But she's not telling the whole truth about why she ended up on Shearwater. And when she discovers the sabotaged radios, a freshly dug grave, she realizes that Dominic is keeping secrets.
Everyone has secrets.
Everyone has secrets. And as the storms are starting to increase in intensity and the seed bank starts to leak water.
Yeah, it starts flooding, and so all the seeds are in danger of being
Right.
gone off the earth forever.
We've got a lot of issues in the book. So I don't want to give too much away about the plot, but I've loved all of her books because she weaves this theme of climate change and the precarious nature of our future in so well. I think this one was my favorite of her novels. It has a very bittersweet ending. The characters are very unique and they stick with you. All the stories are really good. There's a lot of family dynamics in here, not just because they're in this remote island, but you have the normal dynamics of a single dad with his
Teenage
children and
The one
his,
that's not, but-
deceased wife and how to navigate all of these things. I thought this one would be a really good book discussion group because it's a blend of mystery, the nature and climate change. There's a lot of family drama. There's how to deal with grief. Everyone in this book has lost someone or something very important to them. So very rich themes, different perspectives. I think this one is going to be one of my favorites of 2025.
Yeah, I just finished this past weekend, and I agree with you. I'd say this is my favorite book of the year so far.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you know what? Like, I read a lot of good books, and some of them I'm going to talk about them today. But some of them, the themes are fairly common. You got your love triangles and that type of thing. Her writing, like the ideas she comes up with, are so unique. Like, it's things I would not think of, or that most people would think of. And
for me, she brought the whole atmosphere of the place and the storms to life. You could almost like feel that sea spray from the storms hitting your face and slipping on the rocks and trying to navigate this whole thing. And just the setup with the abandoned research station and wondering what happened.
yeah, and you don't predict so often. If you read a lot of books, you can kind of predict what's going to happen, the twists before they happen.
No, I did not predict this at all.
No, and you tend to get a feeling, is this going to be a happy ending, a sad ending? I wasn't sure until the very end how this was going to go.
Yeah.
And I did care about the characters, and I thought this was really good. I read Migrations, and I would say these are not uplifting
Once There Were
books.
Wolves. That
Once
was
There
the
Were
other
Wolves.
one. Once There Were Wolves.
Yeah, she's not really an uplifting, feel-good author, but very interesting, very well done. Yeah, I really like this one.
Oh, good. So what's your first one for us?
My first one is one that was published this February, Dream State by Eric Puchner. It's an Oprah Book Club pick. That's where I first saw it. It's a big, sprawling book. It's about 450 pages, and it follows the lives of two families over the course of 50 years. It takes place mainly in northwestern Montana on a family lake house. It's a vacation lake house. So two of our main characters are Cece and Charlie. They're a young, engaged couple. and it's Charlie's family's lake house.
Okay.
So they're engaged. Charlie is kind of the guy that everyone wants to be friends with. He's optimistic. He's got a great family, good circle of friends. He is already started a successful career as, I think, a cardiac anesthesiologist. He has his act together. Cece, it's floundering a little bit in comparison. She's very attracted to the fact that Charlie has his act together and kind of latches onto him a little bit. They're in love. Cece has dropped out of medical school, hasn't quite figured out what she wants to do next. So the month before their wedding is to take place and they're going back to Montana to get married at this family lake house, Cece goes back there by herself. Charlie stays behind because he's got the fancy doctor job in California. So Cece goes to the lake house by herself to do last-minute wedding planning. She's going to throw herself into that. So while she's there, she meets Garrett, who is Charlie's best friend from college.
Oh, dear.
And she's never met him before, and Garrett is to be the officiant at their wedding. And Cece can't really figure this out because once she meets Garrett, he's like the opposite of Charlie. He does not have his act together. He's had some trauma in the past, kind of led to a nervous breakdown. He had a stint at a mental hospital. He dropped out of college, and he now is a baggage handler at the local airport. He's got like a ratty hat on, bad clothes. They immediately clash and don't quite get along. Garrett is not an optimist. He doesn't believe in marriage. He thinks the world is going to crap with the environment. They just don't get along. But because they're in this wedding together and they have that shared bond with Charlie, they do end up spending some time together. So it's time for your pop quiz, Claire.
Okay. I'm
What
ready.
do you think is going to happen next?
I think she's going to fall in love with Garrett, despite her best intentions.
Correct. So I'm not really giving any plot points away because that's a pretty obvious thing from the beginning. They start to fall for each other to the point where a few days before the wedding is to take place, Garrett gets drunk, sends her an email professing his, love, and immediately regrets it. Sends her another email, says, "Don't open that first email, whatever you do."
Which, of course, is going to make you.
Yeah.
What, Sean?
I don't know, but I think the idea of confessing your love through email is really...
This was 2004. They didn't text as much.
Tom Hanks has something to say.
Yeah, 2004, remember. So the reader doesn't really find out if she opens the email right away. Besides that kind of, what's going to happen at this wedding in a few days, the norovirus is going through the entire wedding party, all their families.
Oh, dear.
So to the point where they're not even trying to quarantine, people are
good
just
times.
puking everywhere. And what is going to happen at this wedding? Are they going to run off together, Garrett and Cece? Is the bride going to throw up on someone? You just don't know. So up until this point, it's been a pretty straightforward kind of like, what's this love triangle going to be? At this point, the author decides not to give you the wedding scene, but you jump forward about a decade into the future, and all of a sudden, Garrett and Cece are the ones that are married, and they have a 9-year-old daughter together. So the reader knows that, a terrible betrayal of Charlie has happened, and the rest of the book really, it's not so much a love story, it is about the male friendship between Charlie and Garrett.
And it remained.
Well, it didn't at first, but after about a decade, Garrett and Cece live in Montana near this lake house. That's where they end up settling. Every summer, Charlie goes back to the lake house. He has since married and has a few kids. About 10 years after, he invites Garrett and Cece and their family to visit at the lake house.
Oh, I bet
And
that's a fun family dinner.
yeah. And so the rest of the book, it deals with a lot of things, but it's really like this male friendship. And the author, the rocky road of trying to get this relationship back after this betrayal. And the author stated that he really was writing a book about male friendship that he wanted to read, but he often didn't find in other books, kind of that it's more complex than it seems. It seems to be like jokey and mock insults on
Right.
the surface, but as time goes on, it can get more complex. And obviously they had issues. Also in the book, you get the viewpoints of their children.
Okay.
And since they're thrown together every summer, the daughter and then Charlie's son, they form a relationship that lasts throughout their teenage years into young adulthood, and they are kind of left trying to unpack all the consequences of their respective parents' choices.
Okay.
So I really liked this book. One of the things in it that I was surprised at, kind of the second half of the book really got into climate change, and I wasn't expecting that. But again, it goes 50 years into the future. So the Montana in 2004 is not the same as Montana in 2054.
Right.
There's been wildfires, extreme heat, loss of snowpack. So the lake house and, all the characters in the story have all been impacted by it.
Okay.
I think this one would be good for a book club. You have the discussion of, was what the characters did worth it? You can have that discussion, the climate change. Also the author's decisions and his writing style, the fact that he does jump all over the place with the timeline and he leaves some things out. I liked it, but it kind of had... it made you a little emotionally distant from the characters. You'd be getting
Okay.
invested in someone, and then you turn the page, a new chapter starts, 5 years have gone by, and oh yeah, that character's dead. Okay. So I think that people would have some
Yeah.
ideas about that. I also really like the ending of this book. We don't get the wedding scene, a quarter of the way through the book, that the author chooses to do the very last chapter.
Oh, wow.
So you
Okay.
go back to 2004 and you see really what went down at the wedding. And it just, the way it was ended, I liked it. I liked this book.
It sounds interesting. I
Yeah,
might have to give
it
that
was.
one a go.
All right, Claire, I'm going to do something for you here.
Yeah, because I'm struggling.
Sorry, folks. New mic stand, if you couldn't tell.
Ah.
There. Let's do it. Cool.
All right. Thank you.
But yeah, so that's the new Oprah's book club pick, and I made sure to read that one right away because I have a lot of guilt that I haven't read some of her other ones. I've been meaning to read Covenant of Water since it came out, and there's a few other ones that they're big honking books. I just haven't done. So I said, I'm going to read this one.
The size
right
of
away.
that one was the Covenant of Water has kept me from reading it.
Yeah. So I said, I'm gonna read this book right away, and I liked it.
All right. My next one is one that I got from Book of the Month, and it's called Penitence. And it was advertised, it's by Kristen Koval. It was advertised for readers of Ann Patchett and Celeste Ng, which Ann Patchett,
Yeah, you love Ann
sign me
Patchett.
up. I'm a super fan. So it was supposed to be a poignant exploration of love and forgiveness, but also a page turner with literary insight to consider whether each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. Oh,
Hopefully.
yeah, that sounds good. So this one starts out, we have a shocking murder that has occurred in the home of Angie and David Sheehan. And unfortunately, their daughter has shot their son at close range. So you have a sibling murder.
Like an actual murder, not just an accidental discharge.
No,
or
it was
a murder.
three
Okay.
shots fired, actually murder. So you have the question here of, like, what would make this young woman do this to a brother that she supposedly loved? As the story goes on, you find out that he's got a very rare disease, which that plays a part in it as well. But the family, of course, is desperate when this first happens, and the father runs across town to get one of the only well-respected attorneys in the town. Her name is Martine Dumont, and he pleads for her help. But she's not just legal counsel. She is also the mother of Angie's first love. Angie is the mom in the story.
Okay.
So, and her former boyfriend is now a very successful New York criminal defense attorney. So they want to bring him in. I believe this was set in Colorado. So it becomes a question of, do we bring him in? You know, what are the implications for the families? But anyway, they decide to confront their shared past, buried, and they also had a very tragic incident that separated them. Angie had a younger sister. They were all skiing, and the sister had an accident on the ski slopes, and unfortunately she passed away. So there was a lot of guilt, blame in both of these families that were once very good friends, like the parents were friends. You know, the children dated, that fractured this whole relationship. So now we are back to the streets of post 9/11 New York, and you kind of go back and forth between the past of these two characters, the woman and her boyfriend, what happened, you know, what happened to fracture their relationship, and then to the daughter that actually committed the crime, like why she committed it, like how the family is dealing with this. And it becomes a little bit of a statement about how a minor is treated in the justice system, like
Okay.
all the different steps that go forth. So it's a lot of guilt. It's a lot of unresolved things, like with how, like when you watch judicial things on TV, everything happens very quickly. Well, unfortunately, in real life, that is not what's happening. You know, you have to wait like months for a hearing and, you know, so long for the investigation and this and that to happen. So this girl has been in a penitentiary type environment now for quite a while, you know, waiting for this trial to take place. So it's exploring kind of like generational trauma. I think I mentioned that last time. The shortcomings of the judicial system. It's prompting readers to really examine complex moral questions. The secrets that people keep, of course, you know, there are secrets, and they really have ramifications for years to come. So I don't want to give away too much of the plot twists with some of these secrets, but it was not a happy book. You know, you
Title
do.
gives it away.
Yeah.
Not sure if any of the books we're reading today are happy.
You do. I mean, she's not like a horrible person. You understand why she does what she does, and that again is like when someone has a horrible diagnosis and doesn't have the ability to control their own lives, destiny, or how they want to end their life. That's another moral question.
I just ordered a book for the nonfiction collection, and it's about the right to death. You know, and it explores that very complicated and complex discussion. So it sounds like this book deals with, you know, the surface level emotions of what it's like to kill somebody.
Right.
But also one that goes beyond just like the standard courtroom drama fare of, oh, it was first degree, second degree. No, there was real thought behind this, it sounds like.
Right, but it wasn't like a bad thought.
Right.
Like she wasn't coming from a bad place. So yeah,
Interesting.
it was very interesting. It would probably make, a lot of times some book groups will take a book like this that's fiction and pair it with the book that you mentioned and really get something even better, you know. So
Yeah, no, that sounds like just those topics. That's a lot of good book club discussion right there.
right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what's
Sounds
your next
interesting.
one?
I haven't heard of that one before.
Yeah. Hopefully a little bit happier than mine, but
Is this one happier? It's very different. This one is called Clear by Karis Davies. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It was published last year. It's very different from my first book. First of all, it's pretty short. It's under 200 pages, so it's almost like a novella, and it's historical. It's set in 1843 and another very remote and almost deserted island, just like your first book.
I think deserted islands are having a moment.
Yeah, it's a Scottish island that seems like it's halfway to Norway, and it occurs at the intersection of two important historical periods in Scotland's history, both of which I knew absolutely nothing about. The first involved the splitting up of the Scottish Church. I guess about a third of the ministers broke away in 1843 to form the Free Church of Scotland.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Me neither. The other period in history, which I found more interesting, was called the Clearances, and it lasted about 100 years, kind of started in the 1750s, where basically the wealthy landowners forcibly removed the poor rural tenants of their land, who were often just, subsistence farming, fishing. They found it more profitable to get those people out of there and just replace them with cattle and sheep, which didn't need year-round care.
Wow.
So this is what's happening at that period of time in Scotland in 1843. So we have three characters. We get the point of view of all of them. The first, his name is John Ferguson. He is a minister, probably in about his 40s, and he is one of these rebellious ministers that left the church. The main consequence of this is that he is broke. He is no longer getting that minister paycheck. He has no money.
Oh, no.
So he needs money because he recently got married to Mary, who is another one of our characters. And Mary and John, both in their 40s, they didn't think they would ever, get married or find love. Mary was 43, and the way they met was there was a mild earthquake, and when that happened, her false teeth flew out of her mouth and across the room, and John happened to be the one to pick them up and brought them back and said, "Are these yours?" Which I think is a very nice meet cute for a 1843 novel, the false teeth being offered. But they have a good relationship. They found companionship and love, later on in life. So, but they need money. So John has agreed to take this month-long job where he has to go to this remote Scottish island and clear it of its lone occupant, who is our third character. His name is Ivar, and again, probably about in his 40s. The landowner's agent has assured John and Mary that this won't be a difficult job. Yes, you have to spend a month there. Ivar's the only one on the island, but he is obedient, he is docile. I think they actually refer to him as an idiot, so you're not quite sure at first if, is Ivar all there mentally. So this isn't going to be a problem. The only problem you're going to have is the fact that you don't speak the same language. One of the main things about this book is it deals with this extinct language called Norn. Again, never heard of it, but it was only spoken, on some of these islands, and Ivar does not speak English or Scots like John does. So,
And this is true? Did you look that up?
the language is true.
Okay.
The Scottish clearances, these characters, not true. So John has some of the Norn language on paper to get across to Ivar that, hey, you got to leave this island whether you like it or not. So he has that written down in Ivar's language. So the story begins with John getting dumped off at this island. He's had a terrible sea journey, been seasick the whole time. They drop him off at water's edge and say, "See ya, we'll be back in a month. Better have this guy with you." And so John sets off. He finds the deserted landowner's cottage. Ivar has no idea that, this is coming from him, doesn't know that this man is coming. A little bit about Ivar. He has been alone for decades. His brothers drowned 20-something years before, and his mother, sister, and grandmother all said, "We're done with this this hard life on this island, and they set off for Canada. For whatever reason, Ivar didn't want to go with them. He stayed behind. Really, the only company he has is this old, ugly horse named Peggy. He spends his winters sitting there knitting and spinning yarn with Peggy, the horse.
Okay.
So John gets to the island, woefully unprepared, can't even start a fire in the cottage, so he's cold, he's wet, he's hungry. Luckily, Mary, who is the more practical, kind of forceful one in their relationship, packed him some food in his bag, so he has some food. Goes to sleep, wakes up the next morning, sets off to find Ivar, promptly falls over a cliff.
Oh, great.
Yes, and is wounded, unconscious. Ivar doesn't find John at first, but he finds his bag washed up to shore. Looks around, doesn't see any ship, doesn't see any person, says, what is going on? Finds some papers in the bag that are completely ruined from the water, and he also finds a photograph, or an early version of a photograph, and it's of Mary. He is immediately intrigued by this photo, carries it around with him for the next day, sleeps with it at his chest, props it up on the stone shelf while he's cooking. He is just drawn to this photograph. Well, the next day, a day goes by, he does find John, who's still unconscious and useless at the bottom of this little cliff, brings him back to his cottage. He's got a head wound, sprained ankle, starts nursing him back to life. A few days later, John wakes up, realizes where he is. Ivar is a lot bigger than he was anticipating, and he is there to tell him he's got to leave. But he is also at the mercy of this man because he can barely walk at this point. And John, being a bit of a coward and realizing he has no way to communicate with him, decides he's not even going to try to tell him the real reason why he's there. So over the next month or so, the two of them form this friendship. They're learning each other's language, and without really knowing, why is John here? Ivar soon kind of loses interest in the photo of Mary now that he has a real live person, John, with him. He's kind of realized how lonely he's been. Meanwhile, Mary is back on the mainland and has heard from other people that sometimes these clearances don't go smoothly. And she thinks, I better go see what my husband is doing. Is he okay? She pawns her wedding ring, hops on a boat, arrives at the island.
Oh, boy.
And the ending I did not expect. It was very interesting. I'm not going to give it away, but it was interesting. And it would give a lot of discussion for a book club about, the choices these characters made. I think another thing that's good for a book group is, Scottish clearances, the Free Church of Scotland. Oh, a dead language named Norn. This is not going to rise to most people's top of their TBR pile.
Right.
So the fact that it's a completely different topic, it's also short, so, it's not going to take up a huge amount of time, I think would make this a good book club pick.
It sounds interesting.
It was.
I like historical books that make me research into like a real topic. So,
Yeah, I just learned that Scotland only has 5 million people that live there.
wow.
Oh, and one time a man on the street told me a joke, and right at the punchline,
Oh, boy.
his teeth fell out.
Gosh, Sean,
Okay.
who knew?
And I thought that was the punchline, but
No.
that was much better than what the punchline actually was.
Okay. So it gave you a reason to laugh in any case.
All right. My last one is one that I just did this past month with my As the Page Turns book club. And it's called Lady Tan's Circle of Women by Lisa C. And Lisa C. is of Chinese heritage. She's written quite a few books. I've read several of them. I think this is the third one that we've talked about in my book club, and everybody has always liked hers. So this one was a very immersive historical novel inspired by the true story of a woman in 15th century China who trained to be a physician. So, according to Confucius, an educated woman is a worthless woman. But
We are trouble.
yeah, Tan Zunian, I'm not sure I'm saying this right, but she was born into an elite family, but haunted by death, separations, and loneliness. Her father was a very high-ranking scholar, but had to be away frequently because taking the test and where he was assigned. And eventually he almost was like a trial judge of a sort. But anyway, her mother died of an infection in her feet from the foot binding.
Yeah.
And so she was sent to live with her grandparents. And her mother was the grandmother was only one of a handful of female doctors in China. So she starts teaching her granddaughter some of the pillars of Chinese medicine, the 4 examinations, looking, listening, touching, asking. And it's bizarre because a man can never actually touch a female patient in this time in China. Like even during childbirth, he's behind a screen, like he would have a piece of cloth and like trying to take your pulse or whatnot. So, you know, there were midwives and everything in the room, but it was a very, very patriarchal society,
Yeah.
but also very distinct differences in what men can do and where they could go. And the females would usually spend time in a house or gardens in one very small section.
Yeah, they couldn't really go out, could
No,
they? Yeah.
no.
I
Well,
read this
for
one
one,
too.
they can't really walk to, I mean, you can't like walk or run anywhere. So anyway, Yunian or Yuxan, she learns about illnesses. She really loves doing this. And the midwife that would come to the house had a young daughter. Her name was Mei Ling. And the grandmother decides that these 2 girls should have some kind of formalized friendship and partnership. So they both were born in the year of the snake, and she kind of envisioned them as tempering the personality of each other or
Okay.
bringing out the best in one another. So despite their differences in class and everything, they do decide to have this ceremony where it's not like a marriage or a romantic thing, but it is some kind of formalized bond in a friendship. So, but then Yuxianan is sent into an arranged marriage. And once she gets there, the ruler of that household is her mother-in-law.
Oh, I remember this mother-in-law.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and I read this probably a good year and a half ago. Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
So she forbids her from seeing her friend. She forbids her from helping the women in the household. She's supposed to act like a proper wife, embroider her foot binding slippers, and recite poetry, and give birth to sons. This is like the most important thing. Give birth to sons. You know, keep the family line going. So her husband is also trying to go the route, and this is one reason why I think they formed the alliance, because they were not nearly as prestigious as her family, but they had money, and he wanted to go into this thing where he would take these examinations and go up in the ranks of society. So anyway, they finally do, she does get pregnant. She has a girl. But meanwhile, there are concubines in the house. And if you don't have a son, and the concubine has a son, he could be adopted as the heir and so forth. So it starts to become this little bit of intrigue here about the doctors and the concubines and the sons and the relationships. And it's all like negotiations. Well, Mei Ling actually has to come in and help with one of the pregnancies. So they do start allowing the 2 girls to see one another, and then they're sneaking out and trying to help other people. So it was very interesting. And eventually they're called to the royal court, and that's where the really big showdown happens. You know, during one of those births. And of course, the 2 girls are also pregnant at the same time. So definitely a twist. a mystery, but a lot of history and a lot about the medicine, which a lot of people found very interesting. Of course, the role of women in society, and in most kind of historical novels, the women did not have it very good at all.
Nope. Yeah, I remember this book, liking it. There were so many things to learn. I was Googling foot binding because I wanted to see photos because she describes it in the book, but I'm like, I can't picture this. Like, what are you talking about? And like seeing the actual photos of their feet. And
The one thing Lisa C. does is every time she writes a book, she has a whole section on her website devoted to
really?
it. She'll have pictures, videos, different things. So
I didn't need my librarian research skills. She did it for me.
Yeah. So you see the foot binding and see
Okay.
how they did it. And also, she has her own family, they call it a marriage bed. And the way they describe it, it's almost like
It's
a
big.
room.
Yeah.
She have like a little office in there, and then she could go in,
Probably because they couldn't walk. They had to be all in one spot.
So yeah, it was very interesting. So I thought, this one would lead itself to a good discussion because the role of women in society, the importance of female friendships, the impact of historical context on an individual's lives, and how a woman would have, because this was based on an actual woman. This wasn't her true story, but parts of it are true. How someone could have broken those societal norms and become something totally different. So, very good.
Yeah, I liked that book too. It was a good one.
So, what's your last one?
Okay, my last one is getting a lot of buzz. It is Broken Country by Claire Leslie Hall. And I think out of all three of my books, this is the one that sucked me in the most. It kept me reading way past my bedtime. It combines kind of this sweeping love story with it's a historical fiction, takes place in rural countryside of England, kind of the 1950s through the 70s, but it's got the pacing of a mystery thriller. You know right from the beginning of the book that something bad has happened. The first line is, "The farmer is dead. He is dead, and all anyone wants to know is who killed him." Well, there are a few farmers in this book, so you're not sure until quite a ways into the book who has died, and was it an accident, was it a murder? So throughout all of this, there's a murder trial happening, and the author goes back and forth in time with all these elements. So the three characters, there's a couple, and it is Beth and Frank. I'd say they're in their 30s. Beth and Frank are happily married. Frank is a sheep farmer. They have kind of a simple yet fulfilling life of farming. They appreciate the land they work on. They have close family, friends, think, good times at night at the pub. There is a tragedy that's happened to them a few years prior. Their 9-year-old son died in a farming accident, so that obviously has put a strain on their entire lives as well as their relationship. The third character is Gabriel, who is in Beth's past. Gabriel was her first love. They fell in love when they were teenagers, very passionate love affair. Gabriel lived in the same rural area, but he was the wealthy and privileged son of, the big house in town. And
I read this one too.
Yes, he went on to Oxford and became a famous author, famous wealthy author. And their love affair ends quite badly, not too long after it begins. Beth also had dreams of going to university and becoming a poet, but all that got put aside when the heartbreak hits and the relationship with Gabriel ended.
Right.
So she remained back, kind of on the farm, fell in love with Frank, got married to him. Frank, of course, loved Beth from when they were children on the school bus together. So those are our three characters. One of the first scenes is Beth and Frank in their fields. They're with their lambs, newborn lambs, and a dog comes racing out of nowhere, immediately grabs some of these lambs by the throat, kills them. So, this is a pretty dramatic book right from the beginning. They call for Jimmy, who is Frank's brother, get the gun. Jimmy runs out, shoots and kills the dog, just as the dog's owners arrive on the scene chasing after the dog. It's a young boy named Leo and his father. And the boy is devastated. His beloved pet was just shot in front of his eyes. And who should the father be but Gabriel, Beth's old lover? He is back in town, recently divorced. Leo's mother, his ex-wife, is in the United States at this point, and Gabriel has come back to town. So this is not a very good way to meet your old flame. And a wise woman who would not have a book written about her would stay far away from Gabriel and concentrate on her very nice husband, Frank.
But Beth just can't seem to do that.
No, because who wants to read a book about someone making good decisions? I make good decisions. No one wants to read a book about my life. So she feels terrible. Beth feels terrible that this boy's dog was killed. She's also still grieving her own son's death. And
Who would have been about the same age as this boy.
And so you can kind of see she has these motherly instincts towards him. She ends up getting him a new puppy and offers to help train it so that it won't harm any livestock. And in doing this, she becomes more entangled in Gabriel and his son. And what happens, happens. And the consequences are felt throughout these families, throughout the entire town. So this, this book really, really drew me in. I felt for these characters, even when they were making poor decisions, and the way the author writes it, she takes us back into time to, I think, 1955 and shows us the beginning of Gabriel and Beth's story and how they did fall in love and what happened. So you do have the murder mystery throughout. There are some twists that I didn't, some of them I saw coming, some I didn't. So it kind of sounds like one of the books you read. It's got that thriller murder mystery to it, but with like a literary slant with the family saga. And
but it is very much a page turner.
Yes.
Like once you get invested in these characters, you've got to keep turning those pages and find out what happens.
Yes, and this one I feel like is getting a lot of buzz. It's a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. I think they've already optioned it with her production company. Wow. Yeah, I like this one a lot. I would say until I read your first book, which was, I think, The Mad Dark Shores.
Wild Dark Shore.
Dark Shore. This was my favorite book of the year, but I actually ended up liking The Wild Dark Shore more. I thought it was more unique. But this one, for a book club, I think most people will like it. And there'll be thoughts about, should these characters have acted. Was it worth it?
It kind of reminded me, what was the book by Delia Owens that was so big a couple years ago? The girl, North Carolina.
Crawdad Sings.
Yes, Where the Crawdads Sing.
Which I didn't like that one as much.
I didn't either, but this one kind of gave me those vibes with the, forbidden love affair and all that.
Yeah.
The tragedy.
Yes. Yep.
Lots of tragedy.
Yeah. So those are. I feel like I've read some good books this year.
Yeah.
I think that 2025 is turning out to be a good book year.
And I think we've given people several good choices today for some book clubs in the past, or that you're going to do in the future. So we hope some of our choices resonate with you or inspire you to start a book discussion group, or remember that we have a couple of book discussion groups here. Mm-hmm. You can check our library events calendar to find out when they are meeting and also the next books that we're going to be doing. So thanks so much for joining us today, and we will be seeing you soon to talk about books again.
Thanks.
Bye.
Book Break is a production of the Greece Public Library, made possible through the support of the Friends of the Greece Public Library. Theme music composed and performed by Sean Greif.